All right, welcome, Yorgos. How we doing?
Hey man, doing well. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Awesome.
All right, we're right at 2 o'clock, so we can get rocking and rolling here. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join us. We've got an interesting conversation today between Axelar and Pangolin. My name's Eli Lapson. I just joined the Axelar team, building out the marketing function and working on some of our partnerships. So yeah, we'll get right into it. We'll do some brief intros, some project overviews, and then get into the actual discussion that everybody came to listen in on today. So, you know, Yorgos, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to have you kick off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and tell everybody about Axelar. And then Justin and Ken, great to have you guys here. If you could follow that and tell us a little bit about yourselves and Pangolin, that'd be great.
Sure. My name is Yorgos. I am one of the founders of Axelar. My background is technical. I did my degree in computer science at MIT. And MIT is also where I met with Sergey, my co-founder at Axelar. Back there, we worked very closely with Silvio Micali on some of the early designs for the Algorand blockchain. I designed the consensus protocol that we launched at Algorand mainnet. And basically, once we launched Algorand in late 2019, we had this issue where developers wanted to build on top of it, but they were all asking for liquidity from some of the big assets like BTC, ETH, USDC, and more, right? And there was absolutely no solution at the time for bringing those assets over. So with Sergey at the time, we realized that the ecosystem is going to be multi-chain. There's going to be many different layer ones that have the same issue. And so we decided to start Axelar to solve this problem for the wider ecosystem. So what is Axelar? Axelar is the first decentralized interoperability solution that can connect all major blockchain ecosystems. So this includes Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cosmos and Terra, Avalanche, Algorand, Polkadot, and any other ecosystem you'd like to be connected to. And essentially for developers, we want to enable them to build on the best platform for their use case while still being able to leverage composability with assets and applications on any other chain. And our end game for users is that we will offer similar user experience to the internet today, where the same way I can talk to all of you through one browser, and I can also access any web page, I can make payments. We'll have something similar on the blockchain in a couple of years, where users will have a universal wallet, and they will only have to think about assets and applications, and we can abstract the backend away completely. And to get there, we need interoperability done right, and that's what we're building with Axelar.
Awesome. Thanks, Yorgos. Justin or Ken, one of you guys want to kick it off from the Pangolin side?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So my name's Justin. I'm from the Pangolin team. So yeah, Pangolin is a decentralized exchange on the Avalanche network. So Avalanche initially via Ava Labs bootstrapped Pangolin to kind of kickstart the liquidity. So much the same way that Georgios explained that with Algorand, there was a massive need for liquidity in the early days of Avalanche's DeFi. Ava Labs recognized that there was a need to bring liquidity in and an ability for people to obviously swap tokens within the ecosystem, and they bootstrapped Pangolin. Pangolin is a completely community-owned DEX, and with the initial token supply, it was 95% to liquidity providers and then a 5% airdrop. So there was no VC allocation, no insider portion, no team allocation. And then in June of this year, there was an on-chain vote to elect a core team, and myself and two other core team members were elected. And over the past 6 months, we've just been building Pangolin, and we've built it from, I think it's now over 11 billion in volume over the past 10 months, I believe it is. And then based upon market conditions, the kind of liquidity fluctuates between 300 to 500 million dollars.
That is awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
So let's get into the conversation here today. We've got a good set of topics to cover. And maybe it makes sense, first and foremost, to kind of explain why we're talking together in the first place. we recently announced an integration between Axelar and Pangolin. And Yorgos, maybe if you could kick it off and kind of explain what this integration actually is, what it does, and how it provides value to end users.
Sure. So Axelar, as I mentioned, it's bridging over a couple of new assets to Avalanche ecosystem that do not exist today. First and foremost is going to be UST and Cosmos assets, but in the future we're also going to bridge over DOT, BTC, and more. And every time you want to bootstrap activity for a new asset on an ecosystem, you need deep liquidity on a DEX, right? That's the first thing you want to do so that users can easily buy the asset. And for Avalanche, the DEX we picked for that is Pangolin, and the first pool that we're going to set up is for UST. I know the ecosystem is very excited about having UST liquidity, and effectively once we integrate with Pangolin, we have commitments from some other top-tier applications in the ecosystem that are also going to pick it up, and essentially through Pangolin, we're bootstrapping activity for the whole ecosystem for UST.
Got it. And, maybe it's just a quick follow on Yorgos, why Pangolin, right? Why did it make sense to, kick this DEX integration off with Pangolin out of all the others?
Yeah, maybe some quick backstory here. So we talked with multiple DEXs in the Avalanche ecosystem, and the first time I talked with Justin, I think it was about 6 months ago. I mentioned the various assets we're bridging over, and I was curious which one they would prioritize. And his immediate response was, well, we have a community of lunatics in the Avalanche ecosystem and in the Pangolin community, and they've all been asking for UST. And coincidentally, we also had a very close relationship with Terraform Labs. At the time, we were working to bring UST to various new chains. And so from that point on, the collaboration flowed very naturally. Obviously, Pangolin is the first DEX in the Avalanche ecosystem. Everyone knows how to use it. So once we bring over UST, it's just going to be very easy for everyone to access it. But also the Pangolin team has been super collaborative from the start, and they also want to build certain products around UST, right? So maybe to foreshadow it a little bit, I know the Pangolin team has a plan to provide the savings product on top of Anchor, so that with the same risk profile that you can get this 20% on Terra right now, you will be able to get something like 30%. So yeah, it's just a collaboration for all of those reasons made a ton of sense, and we're very excited to be working closely with the Pangolin team.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Yorgos. Maybe we can flip that back over to the Pangolin side. Justin, Ken, from your perspective, why does this integration make sense? How is it kind of benefiting, Pangolin and your end users from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think anyone that follows DeFi quite closely recognizes that we're entering into this multi-chain world. I think over the past 6 months, we've seen the emergence of viable L1s and we've seen the emergence of L2 solutions coming through. With this proliferation of these extra networks, it becomes increasingly obvious that bridges is going to be the next major play within DeFi. Axelar, as soon as I read about Axelar, as soon as I found out about them, it was just obvious what like an incredible stellar team they had, what talent they had. And then as you get deeper, you kind of realize exactly how much their solution is superior to anything else out there. So I think in terms of how it benefits us is, so currently at the moment, what happens with DEX is we need to offer our users these exciting tokens. It's very much a part of this industry is people want to buy the new sexy tokens. And UST, as an example, is my personal stablecoin of choice. So it makes a lot of sense having Axelar bring that into the Avalanche ecosystem. I think what you're finding at the moment is this fragmentation. So, for example, for myself personally, I kind of have a large proportion of my tokens on Avalanche. I've got some on the Cosmos ecosystem. I've kind of got them all over. So having an ability to seamlessly, have those tokens interact with the different blockchains, it allows the user experience to improve radically. Instead of, going from Terra Station and having to go into Binance, swapping back to AVAX, then from Binance going back into Avalanche, it's just going to solve that so much from a user experience and allow a much better interaction with these protocols, and you got new use cases, like Josh was saying about Anchor. You can create new designs and new abilities that weren't possible in the past.
Got it. Thank you, Justin. Ken, anything to add on that note from your perspective?
Just more of the same. I'm not going to be redundant on what Justin said. I wholeheartedly agree with all of that. And I think, that differentiation is really what drives us and why we believe so strongly in the benefits of, a partnership like this. It's all about providing, additional value or utility, beyond just the obvious with the token. So this opens up, as Justin said, a whole new set of use cases and, options for new composability, new DeFi recipes, so to speak, for users. And it's, an adapt and differentiate or, go down the path of being irrelevant in this space. And so it's exciting to, blaze new trails with projects like you guys doing this.
Totally. I think you guys did a really nice job of kind of summing up the end user perspective and kind of the benefits to the end user and, simplifying that transfer process. But I wonder if we can kind of dig a little bit into the developer side of things, right? So, they're ultimately the ones that are creating these improved end user experiences. Back to you, Yorgos. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the current challenges developers are facing as it relates to interoperability and kind of, what we're doing there.
Awesome. Yeah. So as Justin mentioned, like even the user experience today is just impossible, right? You need to hold 5 different wallets, use 5 different hops through different bridges to get the asset you want on the destination chain. So even for users, like it's extremely hard to use the existing solutions. On the developer side, I'd say it's even worse, right? It's practically impossible to build any true cross-chain application today. And in practice, there's 2 deployment models that we've seen that kind of work today. And the first one is the cross-chain, so it's a multi-chain model, right? This is something like the one Kerb adopted, where you can go and build your application on multiple different chains. So Kerb has an instantiation on Polygon, on Ethereum mainnet, on Avalanche, on Moonriver, and these instantiations can only offer trading pairs within the native ecosystems that they're built on. Right? So if you want to connect the different versions, you have to take an asset, use some bridge, move to the other chain, but the different versions don't connect with each other. Right? So I like to call this the multi-chain deployment model, but this is not true cross-chain because the different versions don't talk to each other, and you need some kind of method passing in order to connect them. The only successful model that has launched today is the one of ThorChain. And ThorChain actually took multiple years to build. The team built all of the different layers. They built their own infrastructure interoperability layer. They built an application layer protocol. They built the application on top. Right? And ThorChain is an application-specific interoperability protocol, but they had to build the whole stack. And the reason why I mentioned this is I think ThorChain itself proves that it's extremely hard to build any cross-chain application today. If you look at something like Uniswap, it has been forked basically hundreds of times. Something like COM, which launched much more recently, has been forked dozens of times. ThorChain itself has been forked exactly 0 times, right? Even though everyone is so excited about cross-chain, there's absolutely 0 forks of ThorChain, right? Which implies to me that if this stack, even if it's built out, it's extremely hard to fork, right? So you can just imagine how hard is it to build your own interoperability stack from the ground up. And so this is precisely like what we're offering with Axelar. We're basically enabling developers to build something with ThorChain functionality. Let's say you want to build your DEX on Avalanche. You won't have to deploy on multiple chains. Just go build on Avalanche. And Axelar is going to offer all the interoperability infrastructure and a couple of APIs so that you can do cross-chain calls and you can swap DOT for BTC, but all of the logic will live on Avalanche, right? And we believe this is the right model and the one that will dominate in the long term. One, because developers don't want to deploy on 50 different chains, and because the interoperability stack is going to be there very soon, right? So we're going to make it very, very easy for developers to actually do this.
Right. Thanks, Yorgos. Justin, I saw you hitting the 100 button there when he was talking about managing your own infrastructure as a developer. I wonder, if you got any thoughts on that, and
Yeah, sure. I mean, what Axelar is doing is incredibly difficult. There's a reason why we haven't seen, like these bridges just pop up. It's because it's incredibly technically challenging. The way that I look at it at the moment is, there's a lot of these kind of bridges that have popped up. Um, but none of them really achieve the vision of Axelar. So, in terms of outsourcing, we're a Dex at Pangolin. We're not gonna attempt to build these incredibly complex, incredibly valuable infrastructure pieces. What we're gonna do as a Dex is we're gonna look to partner what we think is gonna win the upcoming bridge wars. So in the next 6 months to the next year, this is going to be a major play. So, we want to make sure that we partner with the correct software that can allow us to do all sorts of incredibly cool stuff that give us a competitive advantage over, in a highly competitive DeFi ecosystem. And yeah, hence why we chose hence why we're partnering with Axelar.
all right, you heard it there first. We're in the bridge battle, but next year's the bridge wars. So maybe Justin, I know in preparing for this conversation a little bit, you brought up some other approaches to bridging techniques. Composable, I think, is one. I think there were a couple others. Do you want to talk a little bit about the differentiation here on what we're seeing in our approach and their approach and others?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question. I think from a lot of people in the space is they don't really, in terms of a technical deep dive, they don't really know the pros and cons of one bridge versus the other. So let's talk about single use case bridges, and then maybe we'll expand it to multi-use case bridges or multi-chain bridges. So currently, if you come in from the Avalanche ecosystem, Ava Labs have their own bridge called the AB bridge. That's a single bridge or single chain bridge, right? It's only to Avalanche and Ethereum. So those are very good within that context. But the design space is very much tighter. Then you look at multi-chain bridges. You look at AnySwap is starting to pop up. AnySwap being the kind of predominant player at this stage. You've got Composable, you've got Chainport, and then you got Layer Zero, which is also coming into the equation. Now, what you got to think is there's different models that these bridges choose. Composable is actually very interesting, and Chainport, because what they do is they actually require liquidity on both sides of the bridge. So let's say, for example, I wanted to bridge from Ethereum to Polkadot or sorry, Moonriver or Polygon. I'd actually need, let's say I wanted to take $20. I want to take $20 of AVAX and I wanted to send that AVAX and have Moonriver or Matic or Polygon or Matic on the other side. I'd need $20 of liquidity on each side. So what that means is in order for that bridge to fully function, there's actually a huge requirement that not only is there liquidity in us as a DEX, but we also have to then seed or populate liquidity in a bridge. Now, as a DEX, that doesn't make a lot of sense to us because it's going to fragment our liquidity. It also potentially means that from an implementation point of view, instead of just integrating with an SDK or like, we'd actually have to do a lot of business stuff. We'd actually have to get funds together. We'd actually have to make sure the tokens have enough liquidity on every side. So as someone building a cross-chain DEX, it becomes very challenging and adds a lot of extra steps for us that won't scale and seem impractical on longer timelines. Whereas Axelar obviously doesn't have that requirement. So, to do what we want to do with Axelar in a multi-chain world becomes orders of magnitude a lot easier for us.
Gotcha. Thanks, Justin. Yorgos, anything you want to add on? Oh, I think I'm just getting a note from Yorgos. He doesn't hear anything right now. So he may have lost his connection here. Okay, just give me one sec. Yorgos, you with us? I know you're on mute. Okay, I think we may have lost Yorgos for a little bit here. So I think that makes a lot of sense, Justin, and thank you for kind of recapping that and explaining it to the different approaches to people and the challenges that each one of them kind of come with. Justin or Ken, I'm wondering any other topics you want to touch base on today? Anything else you want to explain to folks? Yorgos, I see you're back. You want to hop in?
Yeah, and I think I missed half of the last 30 seconds from Justin's statement. But I think Justin, you did a great job explaining the different solutions. And one distinction, maybe I'll explain the distinction between the different bridges and the complete interoperability solution that Axelar is building is that, well, with Axelar you can build the bridge on top, right, to swap assets between different chains. But what's most likely to happen in the future is that application developers, asset developers would just pick one interoperability solution to integrate with and leverage composability with everything else so that we won't have to see this fragmentation in the future. While most of these other solutions right now assume we'll live in a fragmented world and enable you to move from one fragmented ecosystem into another, what's actually going to happen is that developers will just integrate with the solution they want on the back end, and users won't have to think about these things at all, right? And of course, you can also build a bridge if you want with Axelar, but in the
Yorgos, I think we lost you again there.
Oh,
there you go. You're back.
Okay. But I'm not sure how much you heard, but I'm basically
just the last. I think we lost the last 5 seconds.
Okay, but that's cool. Yeah, that's the point I wanted to make. So
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, with that, guys, anything else you want to kind of bring up today, discuss before we kind of close out?
I'll jump in. So I just want to talk about some of the cool stuff that we can, do with Axelar, that we'll start looking to build towards within this kind of new ecosystem. So, currently people think about bridges purely just as a way to transfer tokens amongst blockchains, which is an incredibly powerful use case. Let's say, for example, you wanted Atom, you wanted UST, you wanted Luna on Avalanche. You could actually start now doing some really interesting things just with that use case. You could start doing cross-chain yield farming, which you're already starting to see with some protocols. However, with a lot of those protocols, because of the underlying technology, they can't do very effective cross-chain yield farming. But let's say, for example, you had UST earning 20% on chain A, and you had it earning 40% on chain B, you could really kind of chase those yields. There's some interesting kind of game theory around that because I think with this ability, I think you're going to see quite a heightened amount of mercenary capital chasing those yields, which I think is going to, my personal take is I think you're going to start seeing specialization of chains. So some chains are going to specialize on certain types of tokens and certain types of use cases. But what I think is incredibly powerful with Axelar is cross-chain contract calls. So currently, if you think about it, like Solidity is a walled garden. Within EVM compatible chains, you can only interact with other smart contracts. But when you start opening and using a bridge like Axelar, you can actually start designing things that actually allow you to interact with contracts cross-chain. Now, I think that is going to allow completely new Lego blocks. So like when DeFi Summer kicked off and all of these primitives, lending, dexters, all of these kind of things we take for granted now kicked off. It was because of the design space that Solidity within one chain opened up. But now that you have cross-chain function calls, that's going to open up new primitives that I don't even think a lot of people realize. The design space, and I think our imagination is the only real limit to what we can design within there. So yeah, I'm just incredibly excited about what these bridges and what Axelar makes possible.
And that's really an interesting concept there. I mean, any particular primitives jump to mind when you bring that up?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously cross-chain swapping, I think is awesome. So currently, like, let's talk about a simple one. If I'm on Avalanche and I've got AVAX for gas, and I want to go hang out in Polygon, let's say, for example, my mate phones me and he's like, "Oh yeah, there's an IDO on Polygon. You need to get in." Currently, at the moment, I've got to go to Binance. I don't hold Matic, so I've got to buy Matic. I've then got to take that Matic. I've then got to bridge it onto Polygon. I've then got to like actually then enough for gas, and then I've got to get involved in that IDO. With Axelar, oh, it's grand. I just take my AVAX. I say I want Matic on the other side. It automatically bridges across into Matic or Polygon. I've now got enough for gas. And theoretically, it could automatically take that Matic and push it into that IDO. So now instead of that like 10-step process, which is incredibly cumbersome and very intimidating for new users, I can theoretically have almost like a zap or like a few step process to do that. Which means you could do crazy stuff. Like if you had an IDO, after successful IDO, you could then automate things like distribution of tokens. So I'll give you another example. We we pay a lot of our suppliers in Ethereum. They just don't accept USDC on Avalanche. So every pay cycle, we have to transfer money from our multi-sig. We've got to then swap it into USDC. We've then got to bridge it across onto Ethereum and then pay our suppliers like that. Every single pay run, we have to do this, and it's such a pain in the ass. With Axelar, that problem starts to go away.
But like I have to say, I'm tired just listening about your user experience. So hopefully, like we can really help you out here and make it, one zap, like one transaction, and yeah, that's why we're here.
Those are some great examples, Justin. Thanks for kind of putting that together for everybody. So we're coming up on about 30 minutes in, and if we have any closing thoughts, now would be a good time. So if Yorgos or Ken or Justin, any topics you want to close with, or?
Yeah, I actually would love to flip the question around back at you guys. So, what are some of the most interesting new use cases, for this, similar to the question Justin just answered? But how do you see this? What are the low-hanging fruit opportunities?
So for me, it's all the use cases that we have now on layer ones that are just extremely cumbersome, right? These are the low-hanging fruit. So if you want to go from dot to AVAX, it should be like one click, one transaction, and you can exchange the asset directly, right? And another very interesting one for me is you have these assets today like Frax or anything basically that looks like DAI. It has the CDP model, and you can issue it on multiple chains. When you bridge it over, you have different versions of the asset on different chains, right? So with something like Axelar, we can integrate on the backend and link the different versions, so you can have one universal version of the assets across all chains, right? So in the short term, I think this will be the more interesting use cases that we're going to tackle.
Great. Okay, so folks, I think we're going to wrap up. And, any calls to action, Justin or Ken, from the Pangolin side of things? Anything you want people to be aware of coming up, or events, publications?
Yeah, I think in the not too distant future, we'll have to reverse this and host you guys for a similar conversation with our own community. I think that the call to action is people definitely need to start educating themselves about, your bridge and, getting involved in end users, what that means for them and how to do it, because it's going to open up a whole new world of opportunities.
I couldn't agree more with that. On that note, from our side, if you're listening here, you probably are already following us on Twitter, but if not, definitely give us a follow. We also have very active Discord and Telegram channels. We've got a lot of information, to Ken's point, that can help kind of explain and educate folks about what we're working on at Axelar. So if you visit our website, axelar.network, axelar.network, all the channels that you could want are accessible there. And our community program, or our community kind of lead, Kate, just actually launched an incentivized community program. So that's a way for non-technical folks to get involved with the Axelar network, start contributing in a variety of ways, creating content, translations, videos, helping the broader ecosystem kind of understand what we're trying to achieve. And then we've also kicked off an academy. So it's a user/community run academy that explains a lot of the kind of foundational elements of Axelar and helps people get up to speed. So I would invite you to check those things out. And we're actually doing a community call tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we're going to go through both the incentivized community program and that academy to explain them in detail. So with that, I think we'll close it up today.